have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for listening. My name is Frank Salvato, and you can find all we do at undergroundusa.com. As the American people prepare to step back into the light from the darkness cast upon them by the progressive, neo-Marxist minions of the globalist New World Order, we must all be keenly aware that the road back to liberty and freedom won't be an easy one. We'll all have to endure some hardship as we disengage from the claws of an overreaching federal government. But it'll be worth it. The idea that the results of an election can somehow afford immediate solutions to problems and government entanglement that took decades, if not a millennium, to create is the stuff of the naive and the foolish. And while many in our republic have been conditioned to expect instant gratification, enough of us have awakened from the stupor of the mainstream media's disingenuous and false narratives to understand that a radical course correction away from the influences of the New World Order and toward a return to constitutionalism is desperately needed. This awakening is why Donald Trump won the Electoral College by a landslide and captured the popular vote in the 2020 general election. It's also why the people of all 50 states voted to give conservatives and Republicans the majority in both chambers of the legislative branch. And while the Republican Party goes about disenfranchising the deep state uniparty operatives that exist within its ranks, there are enough people who have been elected to office who understand the depths of the corruption in our federal government and how it is now subservient in its station to the deep state and why both must come to an end. The good news for us all is threefold. First, we've elected a bona fide change agent in Donald Trump and delivered the House and the Senate to him. When a conservative U.S. Supreme Court is added into the equation, the result is an opportunity to effect some serious and real change in the federal government. Yes, the deep state, Republicans in name only, can do great harm to this opportunity. Still, the ideological pendulum has recovered so far to the constitutional swing after 12 years of woke nonsense that even the most opportunistic politician knows the business-as-usual status quo cannot stand. Second, the American people are finally ready to reduce the federal government's footprint in their lives. Having survived the despotism of government overreach during the COVID pandemic and the onslaught of societal restriction that wokeism inflicted upon them, they are starved to be left alone, to embrace a freedom unencumbered by the mandates of government not authorized by the minimalism of the U.S. Constitution. Americans, who identify from both sides of the political aisle, are ready to listen to the serious conversations that surround restructuring our tax system away from the one that is income-based, securing our borders and instituting a sovereignty-first immigration system, drastically culling Big Pharma and Big Ag from the halls of power, expunging the totalitarian extremism of wokeness from our government departments, agencies, and commissions, and limiting the use of the U.S. military to interests exclusive to the security of the United States. And last but certainly not least, we have a working model proving that disengagement from government overreach and dependency results in a thriving nation and a thriving people. This model comes to us in Javier Milei's Argentina. What Milei has done in Argentina is nothing short of historical. Javier Milei, who became president of Argentina in December of 2023, has implemented a series of reforms based on libertarianism and the disenfranchisement of governmental overreach to alter the country's economic and political landscape. Milei's economic policies have significantly reduced monthly inflation rates. Initially, inflation was extremely high. But by February 2024, it had slowed to 13.2% from 25.5% in December of 2023. By October 2024, it reached a 3-year low of just 2.7%, indicating a cooling of the hyperinflation that Argentina had been experiencing for decades. One of his most significant accomplishments was achieving a fiscal surplus within the first few months of his term, a feat not seen since 2012. This was accomplished by drastically cutting public spending, which included reducing the number of government ministries and firing numerous public sector employees. Milei reduced the size of the government in Argentina by more than 50%, which included reducing the number of ministries from 19 to 9. This was part of his broader policy of minimizing government intervention into the economy. He introduced an omnibus bill aimed at giving him sweeping executive powers, which, although stalled in committee, was indicative of his aggressive approach to reform. His government passed historic reforms through the Chamber of Deputies, including repealing over 300 articles of law, revoking regulations, and promoting the privatization of state-owned entities. And although his plans for dollarization have been delayed, Milei's administration has focused on stabilizing the peso, which has become one of the world's best-performing currencies under his tenure. This was part of his broader economic strategy to control inflation and stabilize the economy. Milei has shifted Argentina's foreign policy away from the neo-Marxism that plagues the governments of Central and South America, notably by not renewing diplomatic relations with Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Instead, he's labeled them dictatorships and is seeking closer ties with Western democracies, including pursuing a NATO global partnership. But from the beginning, Milei was open and honest about the fact that, in the short term, some pain would have to be endured. His administration enacted harsh austerity measures, which included lifting price controls, reducing subsidies, particularly for fuel and transport, and cutting public works contracts. While controversial, these measures aimed at reducing government expenditures and tackling inflation. Are these same governmental and societal maladies not shared by the United States in the aftermath of the poisonous rule and influence of the neo-Marxist progressive movement? Despite initial opposition and protests, mostly spurred on by the socialist-leaning elements in Argentine society, credible polls indicate that over 50% of Argentina's people have a positive view of Milei as of late May 2024, indicating a level of public support for and acceptance of his revolutionary reforms. These accomplishments reflect Milei's commitment to his campaign promises of implementing shock therapy economics, reducing state intervention, and promoting free market policies. And Milei's innovative approach to healing his nation hasn't gone unnoticed. Milei became the first foreign leader to meet with President-elect Donald Trump during a visit to Mar-a-Lago for the first ever meeting of the America First Policy Institute. There, he gave a speech that put the World Economic Forum globalists on notice that sovereign nations will not simply become useful idiot cogs in their authoritarian monocratic scheme.
I'm very grateful for staying here. I am feeling blessing. I will do my speech in Spanish, but I have a very big and very good interpreter. And then, sorry, but I will speak in Spanish. Todos mis discursos comienzan con hola a todos. Hello everybody.
My speeches start with hello everyone.
Muchas gracias. Gracias por hacerme parte de este evento tan importante y por permitirme hablar aquí entre ustedes que son unos verdaderos gigantes.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this major event and for giving me the opportunity to speak here among all of you, you who are true giants.
Quiero comenzar primero felicitando al presidente electo Donald Trump por su contundente victoria.
First, I would like to begin by congratulating President-elect Donald Trump on his resounding victory.
Por la remontada política más grande de la historia, enfrentando a todo el establishment político, incluso poniendo en riesgo su propia vida.
This has been the greatest political comeback in history, defying the entire political establishment, even at the risk of his own life.
Y gracias a ello, hoy el mundo es un mundo mucho mejor, porque hoy soplan vientos de libertad, soplan muchísimo más fuerte.
And thanks to this, today the world is a much better place. Today the winds of freedom are blowing much stronger.
Un verdadero milagro y prueba fehaciente que las fuerzas del cielo están de nuestro lado.
A true miracle and proof positive that the forces of heaven are on our side.
En 1848, Marx comenzó aquel panfleto siniestro que fue su manifiesto comunista, diciendo que un fantasma recorría Europa, el fantasma del comunismo.
In 1848, Marx began that sinister pamphlet, his Communist Manifesto, with the phrase, "A spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism."
Hoy, un fantasma distinto recorre el mundo, el fantasma de la libertad.
Today, a different type of spirit is traversing the world, the spirit of freedom.
Un fantasma que viene a terminar con el modelo de servidumbre que reina en el mundo libre.
A spirit that has come to end the model of servitude that reigns in the free world.
Bajo el manto de las buenas intenciones y la doctrina de la mal llamada justicia social, la casta política montó un Estado opresor que divide a los ciudadanos entre ganadores y perdedores, quienes pagan impuestos de un lado y quienes viven pagando a ellos.
Under the guise of good intentions and the doctrine of so-called social justice, the political caste has established an oppressive state that divides citizens into winners and losers. On one side, those who pay taxes, and on the other, those who live off them.
La casta política, a quien también llamamos el partido del Estado, se convirtió en el árbitro y a su vez en el gran ganador de esta repartija.
The political caste, which we also call the party of the state, has become both the referee and the main beneficiary of this distribution.
Este modelo reemplazó el libre intercambio de bienes y servicios por la distribución de la riqueza a punta de pistola. Reemplazó las comunidades libres por la colectivización forzada. Reemplazó el caos creativo del mercado por el orden estéril del socialismo.
This model replaced the free exchange of goods and services with the redistribution of wealth at gunpoint. It replaced free communities with forced collectivization. It replaced the creative chaos of the market with the sterile order of socialism.
En la Argentina vivimos la peor versión de este modelo esclavizante, que nos llevó al último círculo de los infiernos.
In Argentina, we experienced the worst version of this enslaving model, one that has taken us to the deepest circle of hell.
Tuvo como consecuencia material la tragedia económica que ha sido el último siglo de nuestra historia. Imagínense que pasamos a ser uno de los 3 países con el PBI per cápita más alto del mundo a tener un salario promedio de $400 para cuando nosotros asumimos.
The material consequences have been the economic tragedy that has been the past century of our history. Just imagine, we went from being one of the top 3 countries with the world's highest per capita GDP to having an average salary of $400 a month when we first took office.
Y como si eso fuera poco, esto también ha causado estragos en el espíritu humano de nuestros ciudadanos. Valores esenciales como el mérito, la ambición, la innovación y el optimismo han sido reemplazados por la envidia, el resentimiento, el nihilismo y la indolencia.
And as if that weren't enough, this model has also wreaked havoc on the human spirit of our citizens. Essential values like merit, ambition, innovation, and optimism have been replaced with envy, resentment, nihilism, and indolence.
Pero al final del camino, el modelo se cayó a pedazos por su propio peso. Imagínense que un libertario llegue a la presidencia, no ocurre en condiciones normales de presión y temperatura.
But eventually this model crumbled under its own weight. Imagine, a libertarian becoming president doesn't happen under normal conditions of pressure and temperature.
Sin embargo, este fenómeno no es exclusivo de la Argentina. En el resto del mundo libre, donde esta enfermedad del alma ha infectado a gran parte de la clase dirigente durante años, afortunadamente también las ideas de la izquierda se empiezan a resquebrajar.
However, this phenomenon is not exclusive to Argentina. In the rest of the free world, where the sickness of the soul has infected much of the ruling class for years, fortunately, the ideas of the left are also starting to crack.
Hay una mayoría silenciosa, o más bien silenciada, que ha comenzado a hacerse escuchar. A pesar de los enemigos de la libertad, se aferran al poder haciendo uso y abuso de la propaganda, la tergiversación y la censura. Y es por eso que quiero agradecer muy particularmente al gran Elon Musk por su trabajo enorme en X que ha salvado a la humanidad.
There is a silent or rather silenced majority that has begun to make itself heard, despite the enemies of freedom clinging to power through propaganda, distortion and censorship. And this is why I would especially like to thank the great Elon Musk for the wonderful job he has been doing to save humanity through communication around the world.
Lo que ocurrió en Argentina primero y en estas elecciones en Estados Unidos ahora es una prueba cabal de ello.
And what happened in Argentina first and now in this US election is clear proof of this.
Porque en todo el mundo se están formando dos grandes posiciones antagónicas, quienes están avergonzados de los valores de Occidente contra quienes estamos orgullosos de ellos, el partido del Estado contra el partido de los ciudadanos libres, el partido de la regulación contra el partido de la libertad.
Because throughout the world, two great opposing positions are forming. Those who are ashamed of Western values versus those of us who are proud of them. The party of the state versus the party of free citizens. The party of regulation versus the party of freedom.
Estoy muy feliz de compartir con la nueva administración de los Estados Unidos el mismo amor por la libertad y estoy convencido de que juntos volveremos a darle el lugar que se merece.
I am exhilarated to be able to share with the new United States administration the same love for freedom, and I'm convinced that together we will restore it to the place it deserves.
Sin embargo, el camino es cuesta arriba. Poco a poco el antiguo régimen se derrumba por su propio peso, pero el nuevo mundo tarda aún en nacer.
However, the road ahead is steep. Slowly but surely, the old regime is collapsing under its own weight. But the new world is still taking its time to be born.
Porque la casta política, el establishment, el pantano o como quieran llamarlo, controlan la mayoría de los medios, las cátedras universitarias, la burocracia estatal, los sindicatos, las organizaciones sociales, las organizaciones supranacionales y también muchas fundaciones, eso que los marxistas llamaban superestructura y que para nosotros es una catedral de la miseria material y espiritual.
Because the political caste, the establishment, the swamp, or whatever you want to call it, controls the majority of the media, university chairs, state bureaucracy, unions, social organizations, supranational institutions, and also a whole lot of foundations. What Marxists would call a superstructure, to us is a cathedral of material and spiritual misery.
A través de ella, la izquierda ha logrado instalar sus ideas, yendo contra toda noción de sentido común e incluso contra la propia naturaleza humana.
Through that, the left has managed to implant its ideas, going against all notions of common sense and even against human nature itself.
Y el daño intestino que la casta política le inflige a la cultura y al crecimiento económico no es un problema exclusivo de cada país.
And the heinous damage the political castes inflicts on culture and economic growth is not a problem confined to individual countries.
Porque como famosamente dijo el prócer de la literatura argentina José Hernández, los hermanos sean unidos, esa es la ley primera, porque si entre ellos pelean, los devoran los de afuera.
Because as the great Argentine literary figure José Hernández famously said, brothers should be united, for that is the first law. For if they fight amongst themselves, they will be devoured by those from outside.
500 años antes de Cristo, en los albores de la cultura occidental, cientos de ciudades de Estado griegas formaron una liga para hacerle frente al despotismo persa. O sea, cuando Occidente enfrentó su primera prueba de fuego, los pueblos libres estuvieron a la altura y se asociaron para superarla.
500 years before Christ, at the dawn of Western culture, hundreds of Greek city-states formed a league to confront Persian despotism. In other words, when the West faced its first trial by fire, the free peoples rose to the occasion and teamed up to overcome it.
Hoy, en el apogeo de la cultura occidental, encontramos una nueva prueba de fuego. En el frente interno, el combate contra el virus woke y sus consecuencias nefastas. Y en el frente externo, la amenaza de nuevas formas de despotismo y terror son dos expresiones distintas de la barbarie, pero ambas peligrosas.
Today, at the height of Western culture, we face a new trial by fire. On the domestic front, the fight against the woke virus and its devastating consequences. And on the external front, the threat of new forms of despotism and terror. These are two different expressions of barbarism, but both are dangerous.
Como alguna vez lo hicieron los antiguos, creo que debemos unirnos para hacerle frente a esta barbarie y formar una alianza de naciones libres, custodios del legado occidental, estableciendo nuevos lazos políticos, pero también comerciales, diplomáticos y militares.
Just as the ancients one did, I believe we must unite to confront this barbarism and form an alliance of free nations, guardians of the Western legacy, by establishing new political ties, absolutely, but also commercial, cultural, diplomatic, and military.
Thank you very much.
Is this not a significant part of the core America First, Sovereignty First ideology that brought Donald Trump to the Oval Office in 2016 and now again in 2024? This is the path the United States can take if we realize, understand, and support Trump's Sovereignty First, America First national policy, given the evidence of how it's working successfully in Argentina under Milei's leadership. The only thing that can keep the United States and the American people from reaping the benefits of a limited federal government through the application of Trump's America First policy is if we allow the deep state to hobble and kill the movement in its determination to maintain the bureaucratic status quo. If we keep the pressure on and support the incoming Trump administration's agenda to destroy the deep state and the autocratic bureaucracy of the inside the Beltway class, we can all be free as our framers intended. If we claim victory and do little else, we'll have forfeited this incredible opportunity to the self-interested greed merchants of the selfish, elitist class who have ruled us into the desperate situation we exist in today. I don't know about you, but to me, the choice is clear. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL, AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Our federal government has been co-opted by the globalist sycophants of the deep state bureaucracy. At every turn, this bureaucracy expands its power over both the American people and the states in which they live. The framers knew corruptible men would one day bastardize their elected authorities and attempt to centralize government in Washington, D.C. That's why they gave us the 9th and 10th Amendments. That's why they left standing the tool of nullification. In his book, Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government, Frank Salvato lays out how states can claw back their constitutionally mandated powers from the overreach of the federal government, doing so in a manner that prevents a second bloody civil war. Get your copy of Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government. Available on Amazon.com in Kindle form and paperback.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, I want to ask you about the Doge, but just briefly, what do you? I mean, come on, some of these celebrities and folks like that. Now America's just a bad people, according to Michael Moore. I mean, are we just going into the twilight zone here?
Well, these are the same people who told us we were enlightened and wonderful when we voted for Joe Biden and Barack Obama. So obviously we vacillate back and forth from being fantastic and enlightened people to being the scourge of the earth. But that's their MO. If they can't embrace individualism and the idea of liberty and freedom and the facts that we bring so many great things to the world in our short time as a constitutional republic, they have to keep thumping on the idea that somehow we're intrinsically flawed. Well, Michael Moore, take a shower, and to use the philosophy of Andrew Dice Clay, eat a carrot, you fat bastard.
Well, Frank, yeah, some of these celebrities, I mean, they're popping off again, and they're going to leave the country, and who cares at this point, right? Then leave. We don't even need to know. We really don't care. Number one, but why is it so important that we all know you're going to leave? If you don't like it, just go. Right. Well, exactly, and that is kind of a difference even. When the election doesn't go the conservatives' route, we don't jump up and leave the country. We start working again in order to try to convince people of our point of view and make the election go a different way the next time. But I guess the far left liberals, they don't want to do that. Well, that's what freedom is. If I don't like the way the election went, I have the freedom to affect change. They've got the same freedom. They're just too lazy to actually do it without complaining. They making stuff up and complaining. Oh, we're an evil country. What am I going to complain about today? Let's go back 250 years and find something to complain about. The people who voted for Donald Trump this time around, and in an electoral college landslide and the popular vote, that's why they have to go back to the canard that we're just an evil people, because they can't say we lost the election because the popular vote didn't go their way. They lost. Lost. And that's it. So the whiny Karen people like Michael Moore are going to amplify right now and threaten to leave the country and shave their heads and boycott and not have sex with their partners. I care. Yeah, I really don't care. If I'm living with, if I'm attached to somebody who's stupid enough to shave their head to say you're not getting sex, maybe I wasn't in a good relationship in the first place. That's right. Talk about a red flag. Yeah, that may be time to sit down and either go to family counseling or call a lawyer. Yeah, exactly. Well, just very, very fringe sort of behavior there. Exactly. Yeah. It's spoiled brat behavior is what it is. I'm not getting my way, so I'm throwing a temper tantrum, and you're a meanie. Yep. Exactly. And I thought they were supposed to be the adults in the room, Frank, that saved us from Donald Trump in his first term. Only when they have champagne and caviar. Otherwise, they go kicking and screaming. Exactly right. Well, people are going to go kicking and screaming when Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy make recommendations about where things are going to get cut in terms of the budget, with the Department of Government Efficiency, and even whole departments like maybe the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, things like that are really in peril here. Well, I can hear the basis for every closure, and the basis is that's redundant. The Department of Energy is redundant, except for a very few sections of it that run our nuclear programs and arsenals. That's it. Every state has a Department of Energy. Every state has a Department of Environment in one capacity or the other. So why do we need the EPA? Every school district has a school board that answers to county and state. So we need a third layer of redundancy. The federal government has just decided to create these authorities out of nothing. Right. They encroach on the state's authorities under the 9th and 10th Amendment all the time.
And this is why it's such a mandate to move forward on this. Let's get rid of the redundancies because we don't need a centralized government overlord. Let's let the states do what the states are supposed to do under the Constitution.
Well, this is really a spurious kind of poll here. We'll see, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, is there a big shift? They're at the very end of the election in Iowa. And of course, Donald Trump ended up beating Kamala Harris by 14 points. It's a 16-point problem for the pollster. Well, that pollster, Ann Sulzer, evidently is going to retire now, even though she says that, well, she was going to retire anyway. But let's bring in Frank Salvato from undergroundusa.com, author of the book Nullification. Good morning again, Frank.
Mr. Kyle.
So what do you think? I mean, that poll, everybody was talking about that poll, and it was like, okay, this really could indicate that Trump is just collapsing. I remember seeing that word, collapsing, about things, but obviously it was pretty far off.
Well, she outed herself. Now, she did put her paperwork in over a year ago saying this was her last contract with the Iowa paper, with the Des Moines paper. Okay, I'll take that at face value. But that just means that she purposely skewed the results to affect what she wanted. Mm-hmm. And it really kind of is a testimony to how dishonest and disingenuous the mainstream media is. And in this particular demographic of the mainstream media, the pollsters. And that was, she wasn't the only one. In this last election, the pollsters were so far off. And they were clustered together in being so far off. There were one or two. Emerson was good. Rasmussen was to the right but reliable. And Atlas was very, very good, as they usually are. But everybody else was they were grouped and clustered and kind of moved in the same way back and forth. And they weren't accurate. So push polling, which is something that was invented back by Lippmann and Bernays back in the early 1900s as a propaganda tool to get you to answer things the way they'd like you to answer. That's what a push poll is, as opposed to a straight-ahead opinion poll. The push polling has become the marquee in the polling industry. That's why they can't be trusted. The most accurate polling came from a place called Polymarket. Mm-hmm. And it's a betting platform. People who were betting on who was going to win, they were the most accurate when it came to the polling. Imagine that. And then what happened to the CEO of Polymarket right after the election? The FBI raided his home, and they won't tell him why.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's so, not only do we have proof that the pollsters are full of it, we've got just a doubling down of the FBI being weaponized, and to go so far as to go after a pollster who happened to be correct.
Wow, indeed. Well, I tell you what, Frank, we've also seen a major, some would say it's major, but some would also say we've already seen something akin to this. But the big news headline over the last 24 hours has been that the Biden administration is now going to take the ban off of Ukraine using U.S. arms if they want to make strikes deep into Russian territory, into Russia proper. How do you think this is going to affect, just not only the war, but the dynamics of the incoming Trump administration, who's going to try to end this war, evidently?
Well, it's absolutely an escalation, and it's irresponsible. I know they're saying it's in response to North Korea putting their troops in certain areas at Russia's disposal, but giving Ukraine the capability to launch into Russia proper is, by definition, an escalation. And when you are in transition, unless the mainland United States and United States forces are directly threatened, to escalate something like this is irresponsible. If this is a political move in order to complicate Trump's entry into the White House in January, then it's vindictive. It's a vindictive move by the Biden administration and the far left, who won't be in control of this. We're seeing that, they're giving as much money away through the State Department to various things as humanly possible before they leave, to try to forward fund things going into the Trump administration. I don't think that's going to bear out. I think a lot of things are come to a screeching halt in January. But this one is a little bit more serious because, if Putin gets up in the morning and he decides that this is BS, he's got the ability to retaliate in a significant way, so we feel it.
Right.
And that's not a good thing.
No, it's not. And certainly, as you mentioned, in the transition, see, I remember even back when there were some issues, I think, between the George H.W. administration and Bill Clinton. Typically the two presidents, the president-elect and the president, have some meeting of the minds, or there's some kind of thing that informs one way or the other, because you don't want to rock the boat too much. And after we saw this, sort of cordial meeting, as it were, over the weekend, or last Wednesday, I should say, with Biden smiling and Trump being very gracious and so forth, and now suddenly this happens, it does again beg this question: did Biden even come up with this policy?
No, Biden hasn't come up with a policy in 4 years. This is all Obama 2.0, and it's got the petulant child attitude that comes along with the Obama administration. The temper tantrum 3-year-old, I get my way, otherwise I just do it anyway, and I broke it. So what are you going to do about it? Attitude that the Obama administration had the entire time. They talk about a peaceful transition of power. The Obama worked to make sure that the neo-Marxist progressive movement was working all the way up to the day that he left office. Normally, an outgoing president reserves the last days of his administration to weigh pardons and to figure out how to smoothly transition. The Obama administration did not do that. They went out kicking, screaming, clawing, leaving marks on the floor. And while Biden might be smiling to the cameras because he's going to get ice cream afterwards, the people in power there, the Clains and the Powers and the Rices, they're not going out without scorched earth, because that's what neo-Marxist progressives do. If they don't win, they have to burn it to the ground before they are forced to leave. So once again, who's the dictatorial power here? Trump is coming into office wanting a peaceful transition of power, something that's always been afforded every president but him, by the way. And these people are just setting things on fire as they're leaving. Remember, it was something as childish as taking all the W's off of the keyboards in the White House.
I remember
when the Clinton regime was leaving the White House. But they have to do something that's just obnoxious, and this obnoxious move can have very lethal consequences.
Oh yeah, well, because Putin, he could probably make this argument now, but certainly, or could have made it before this decision, but certainly now, because he can say, well, the United States is really participating in this, and he could use it as a pretext to retaliate. Like you were saying, he can retaliate in very significant ways. And I'm not just saying, we're not saying to be scaredy cats of Putin, but this kind of thing is complex or complicating for the incoming administration, especially knowing that Trump will try to do everything possible to get this war to come to an end. And the Biden administration has just been letting this thing just kind of go on and on and on. And there's a lot of money involved.
Well, it's disingenuous, and ever since LBJ, and to a lesser point, John F. Kennedy, he at least was just dealing with advisors over in Vietnam, but it kicked into high gear under LBJ. When Democrats have control of the war machine, they always love the proxy war. Oh, we're not there, but we're just giving all of our equipment and all of our money to the other people so they could fight it. At least Putin's saying, I'm going to war in Ukraine. So in this instance, Putin's being more honest than Biden is.
Yeah, indeed. Trump must have felt pretty good, President-elect Trump. I must have felt pretty good going right back to MSG, where he had the big rally, of course, prior to the election, which was not a Nazi rally, as it turns out. And I guess victory is sweet. Yeah, it must have been a pretty sweet return to Madison Square Garden, one would think, with all those people cheering USA, USA. I mean, the contrast, Frank, between Donald Trump and how he's, just being received everywhere, and then by contrast, you've got Kamala Harris, who's still trying to get money. The Harris campaign is still trying to pay off whatever debt they have, and it's not insignificant.
Yeah, and that just reflects the outcome of what the election was. It was a win. Again, and this can't be stated enough for the left, like the people like Michael Moore and Robert De Niro and all the people who are now obviously on their way to the airport to get out of the country because it just can't live here anymore. Right. Landslide in the Electoral College and the popular vote. There's no whining about this. The people were asked who they want. The people have spoken. Deal with it. But they're not, Kyle, and I guarantee you every step of the way they are going to try to stop his agenda. They're going to continue smearing this guy. Hell, Jim Clyburn is still calling him a Nazi. He's the president-elect of the United States. If we were to, just imagine if people on the right were calling Joe Biden or Barack Obama these things after they were elected and they were president-elect. The left they'd start burning things.
Indeed they would. That's right. Yeah, I just never stand for it. But this is all this like vestigial, TDS for some of these politicians. But Frank, in my travels, I find that it's still pretty prominent. I mean, people just really, they just can't accept this, or they just can't accept the idea of Donald Trump existing.
We talked about this in the last segment. Republicans lose an election and we persevere. Okay, well, let's work to try and make it different next time. Let's cultivate some candidates that are worth it, that have fidelity to the Constitution, that actually want to serve the people instead of themselves and their political party, and let's get them elected. The left just hates. And the people who still suffer from Trump derangement syndrome are the haters out there. Yep. They're the haters. And they never look in the mirror on this. You're supposed to be tolerant of this. You're supposed to be inclusive about that. You're supposed to think in a way that puts diversity and equity above all else. But you have to hate this person. That's not the way a healthy society thrives. It's just not. You can disagree with the way I think. You have every right in the world to do that. You have every right in the world to disagree with the outcome of the election. You can even claim like Donald Trump did that the 2020 election was stolen, if you want to talk about facts and present them. And right now, when you're looking at, 16 or 21 million votes that just miraculously disappeared between 2020 and 2024, your argument sitting down talking to me is you've got a little bit more ammunition. But just to say you shouldn't win because we hate him, with no substance behind that hate, but just to know that you've answered Pavlov's bell. Yeah. These are the people that are divisive. These are the people who are not inclusive or tolerant. These are the people who are the giant hypocrites, saying you have to be tolerant, but we hate him. If you hate Donald Trump, or you foam at the mouth whenever someone says Donald Trump or Trump, you've got a problem that you need to address and get over.
Yep.
because the 3-year-old petulant kicking and screaming in the grocery store aisle child that you are is becoming incredibly annoying to the adults.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, I'll tell you what, Frank, would you like to take a quick phone call this morning?
You bet.
Okay, here we go. We got Mary giving us a call from St. Pete. Good morning, Mary. You're on with Frank Silvato.
Good morning. Yes, I would just like to say thank you to these Buckhead people up in Pennsylvania for still counting votes up there. For Bob Casey and Mr. McCormick, who won, but they're going to recount the votes again, which they have to, but then they're not going to certify. Is Pennsylvania going to run the rest of the country on the voting? And the other thing is, shame on the Republicans for going through a platform to pick out the Senate Majority Leader on a, quote, secret vote. I thought that they were going to go on transparency. So why are they ashamed to put out who they voted for House Senate Speaker? It's really not a good look. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mary. Appreciate the call. Mary in St. Pete, everybody. Yeah, and Frank, what do you think about that?
Well, let's look at Pennsylvania first, and there's got an absolute perfect and cogent point. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court said you can't count the ballots that you're trying to include now. And the county election commission, on a vote of 2-1, said, we don't care. The one woman on the council literally says, we know that we don't follow court precedent here in this country anymore anyway, so I'm just going to keep counting them. That's how you get their attention. This woman should be removed immediately, and the Supreme Court should move to order them to stop counting ballots. Yep. Because they're counting ballots that don't have 2-signature verifications, which is their election law. So she's breaking the election law. She should be held accountable for it, and it should be a legal action against her. This idea that we only follow the laws when we want to is ridiculous. The law's there because that's how society maintains order.
Mm-hmm.
Now as to the Republicans in the Senate, it's because it was Mitch McConnell running that election for the Senate Majority Leader. He's a corrupt jerk. And it had to be secret ballot because that way you didn't see his arm twisting on this. He had to install his puppet because he saw the model that Nancy Pelosi put into the House where, I'm going to resign the speakership because I don't want to deal with that guy, and I'm going to sit in the back bunch, but I'll pull the strings on Hakeem's puppet, puppet marionette. I'm still the one in the power, but I'm not really. I'm just rank and file. That, for the remainder of his term, that's what Mitch McConnell's going to be doing. He's going to be pulling John Thune's strings. And this election, Mary's right. If the Republicans talk about transparency and we need to be more transparent, then this was a sham. And I hope that when J.D. Vance sits down as president pro tem of the Senate and the titular head of the Republicans in the Senate, once he's sworn in, that he muscles through a re-election of who leadership should be.
Right.
Because this McConnell era of poison that has happened to the Republican Party, the injection of the Uniparty, and that's exactly what he is. He's one of the 2 people who leads the Uniparty in the Senate, him and Chuck Schumer. They're cut from the same cloth, and we can't be rid of Mitch McConnell fast enough.
Yeah. Well, I think, Frank, you had even commented, I think, before on this notion of having that leadership election on this side of the new term.
Yeah, why should the old Senate be the ones electing the leadership for the new Senate? Exactly. We listen to what the senators-elect have to say. Yeah, really? Then wait until after they're sworn in and then have your vote.
Exactly right. It makes sense to me, Frank.
You're listening to Underground USA.
They're funding abortions, demanding Americans comply with their woke climate agenda. They teach people that the U.S. is a system of white supremacy while stripping away your Second Amendment rights. A California Democrat? No. It's Bank of America under CEO Brian Moynihan. There's enough people pushing political agendas in America. Your bank shouldn't be one of them. Bank of America. Their lies start with their name.
If you like the podcast, please head over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It comes straight to you, straight to your email inbox, circumventing the censors and the fact-checkers of social media, who are worthless, as we all know. And please know, the top Substacks are chosen for AI-generated search engines based on the number of likes and paid subscriber comments. That shows engagement. Liking and commenting are ways to show your support for our show if you don't want to subscribe as a premium member. And as we prepare for the holidays, please remember to talk politics, current events, and religion with your family, friends, acquaintances, and colleagues. Be respectful, use facts, and listen to their point of view. Because when we hear each other, we start to understand that we have more in common than we do in difference. And that's when the deep state dividers lose. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no political correctness, and no wokeism. My name is Frank Salvato.